All right, so I'm Margaret Klein-Solomon. I'm the Executive Director of Climate Emergency Fund, and it is my pleasure to be hosting this very exceptional call tonight. This is it. As you can tell from David's horrifying introduction, we are at a decision point where, we are out of time. So this call will last perhaps a little bit over an hour. We're going to have speakers, Adam McKay, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, and then we'll hear from two incredible activist groups, Declare Emergency, and Climate Defiance. And then we will head into breakout rooms to talk about what each of us can do to fight back against this apocalypse that we're just accelerating towards. And to get started, we are going to watch a brand new video produced by Yellow Dot, Adam McKay's nonprofit media studio. Then we will hear from Adam, Congresswoman Tlaib, and the activists before we head into the breakout rooms. Overall, the goal here is for each person to find out how they can engage and take action. Particularly, we're recommending supporting Climate Defiance and Declare Emergency through donating, or even better, joining up. So let's watch This Is It by Yellow Dot.
Wildfires, extreme droughts, heat waves, those are the things that have big economic impacts.
If you don't worry about it now, it's too late.
It is a threat multiplier.
The climate challenge is gargantuan, thanks largely to fossil fuel executives and politicians doing their bidding.
We are passing on extreme grave problems for our children.
The warnings from those annoying scientists have been coming louder and louder for decades. But it turns out, they're right. Science tends to be like that. And now, even with all the data showing that we only have a matter of years to act before unimaginable catastrophe hits, our leaders and media still focus on donors, photo ops, and poll numbers. Yep, even when they themselves choke on dangerous wildfire smoke or see their city burst into flames, they just keep pretending like nothing is happening. The reality is, we're now living in the last window for action. We must stop all new drilling right now, transform our power system to an entirely renewable system, and bolster ourselves for the harsh, new, chaotic world we're already living in. The good news? Thousands of brave activists are already on the ground giving their voices, bodies, and freedom for our future. Let's quit screwing around. Join them, fund them, give all you have. Let's stop pretending our leaders and institutions are going to protect us on their own. This is up to us. We're all we have, and it's time for all of us to give all we've got. It's 2023. We're out of time. This is it.
All right. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker, the creator of that video and the award-winning director, producer, and screenwriter, Adam McKay. He is known for his exceptional storytelling and thought-provoking films, utilizing his creative genius to shed light on the urgent crisis of climate change. His latest movie, Don't Look Up, parodied the ridiculous situation we find ourselves in. As the recently added board member of Climate Emergency Fund, as well as through his work, he has sparked awareness, mobilized action, and pushed the boundaries of what it means to confront the climate emergency through the power of cinema. Welcome, Adam, and thank you for everything you do on the climate emergency.
Thank you, Margaret. The big reason I wanted to speak, because we could have just played that video and rolled into these incredible activists and voices that we have here today. But the worst thing we can do with the climate emergency that we're currently living in is to frame it as just another cause. I've been on many calls and Zooms in the past decade, 5 years, that start to feel like we're trying to close the hole in the ozone or save the spotted owl. But just to put this into context, because I think the number one thing that's under attack in our society now is context. It's always shifting to sell you something, to dissipate your worry, to increase your worry. But just to put it in new context, today, the sea ice melt numbers that are going on, which is a big number for the health of our climate, are literally off the charts. You look at the graph for sea ice melt, and I was talking to a friend of mine, and I said, if I were directing a movie and I had a graph on the wall that was supposed to indicate trouble, I would say this graph is too over the top. No graph ever looks like that. That's happening today. And then here's where we get into why we're all here today. Because that alarming number, that alarming graph is not being covered by the news media across the world. And, I'll just sort of walk you through how I got here. That begs a question: why? And I think if you look back at the past 40, 50 years of our history, you can explain everything through the fact that big money has rolled over every aspect of our society. They have captured large swaths of the news media, large swaths of our elected officials, and not to mention our very culture. So the number one thing we're up against is the data is clear. The emergency is here right now. The next 2 years, with this super El Nino kicking in, are going to beat the crap out of us. We've already had stretches of 1.5 C warming, which, if any of you know, is a scary number. Now, granted, it's not the global average, which is different, but there are scientific papers that have been written about how 1.5, according to the fossil record, is the destabilizing number that we should be worried about. Let me say that again, because I think there's this kind of 40, 50-year thing that we're like, well, the experts have it kind of figured out. 1.5 C, according to the fossil record, is the destabilizing number. And if you look at the sea ice melt that's going on right now, and we're not even getting into the smoke event that just hit the Northeast or the crazy fires in Canada, which, by the way, are 1,300% higher than they should be. We're not even getting into that. Look today at what's going on through the South in America. Look what's going on in Siberia with fires, flooding. China, half the world's rivers are drying up right now. We're in it. This is no longer theoretical. So I encourage you all to dig into the science. If you're on this call, I know you already know kind of what's going on, but dig deeper, because the deeper you dig, it will get more distressing. And that's why I've aligned with the Climate Emergency Fund, which is, I think, the only major non-for-profit, maybe there's another one or two, that actively funds climate activism. I spent decades doing the dance with corporate Dems and moderate Dems and being in rooms with them. And it took a long time for me to realize they are not sincere, that this half sort of measure, tax break kind of thing they throw out there is all a way of dodging what is a very clear reality, which is money owns a lot of our governments. And if you think, oh, Adam, you're paranoid, I've spoken with two prominent senators in the last month. And I said to them, is anyone talking about the emergency that's going on with the climate? And both in DC, and both of them said no. And it sent a chill up my spine. And the other night I was surfing through Apple TV, and I saw a video that popped up that was about the Indonesian tsunami, the Jakarta tsunami from back in, when was it? 2003, 2004. And the video said a compilation of handheld video of the tsunami. And I just kind of clicked on it. And there were probably 36 videos of people filming the ocean retreating and laughing and saying, oh my God, what's going on? And more people gathering. And the thing that really hit me was there was one video where there was someone walking towards the retreating ocean, and then you could see the tsunami coming back. And the person couldn't comprehend what was happening. So they just stood there as a 30, 40-foot wave hit them. I can say this without exaggeration, as someone who has gone through all the scientific data, who talks to scientists on a regular basis, to elected officials. That is where we're at right now. This is the number one thing to take away from this call. We have 3-4 years before this gets so disruptive, nasty, violent, that we can't respond. And unless you think, oh, Adam McKay, the guy who did Step Brothers, is telling me this. Sir David King, a chemist from the UK, hardly a reactionary, says the same thing. Hansen, the head of climate studies at Columbia, is super alarmed. Bill McGuire, Charlie Gardner. There are Peter Kalmus, a NASA scientist, Rose Abramoff, on and on. And I think the wall we're fighting is, how can the science be this clear? Yet in my life, I'm not feeling it. And I would just point to the Iraq war. I would point to the housing collapse. I would point to the free trade discussion of the late 90s, which, let's face it, almost directly led to the rise of Donald Trump and the collapse of American industry. And I would say, if you look at each of those moments, why didn't we know that that was coming when it was so clear? And the answer in every case is a lot of people with economic incentives telling you that the models have never shown this before. Well, that's where we're at right now. And I know that's a big weight on your backs, but the good news is I've been giving to Climate Emergency Fund. I've been supporting these activist groups now for a couple of years. And I gotta tell you, nothing cuts through the BS and rigmarole more than straight up disruptive activism. I'm talking about the power of the people. I'm talking about the people that created democracy, that threw the kings out of power, that created unions, that freed India, that woke the government up about AIDS, that created civil rights. I mean, you look at the civil rights activists and what they were up against at the peak of Martin Luther King's voice. Do you know how many people in the US, according to a poll, agreed with him? it was less than 30%. So I can't say this with the proper amount of muscle, blood, force, personal reputation. Give everything you have right now. Anything you're hearing about 10, 20 years off is bullshit. And now is the moment. I have daughters, I have a wife, I have a family, and turn on the Weather Channel right now. Forget the corporate news. This stuff is hitting right now. So write the biggest check you can. I'm selling all the junk I had on my walls, collectible art, old comic books, all that junk, because it is nonsense to hold on to that right now. We are really, and trust me, I have spent so much time on this. We are 2-3 years away from collapse unless these hacks, grifters, and unimaginative company men wake up. And the only way to wake them up is to block their doorways, scream at them, and tell them reality is banging on their back door.
Adam, I couldn't agree with you more. And we gotta introduce a different kind of Democrat than the ones that you've been discussing. I do want to just note that it is Father's Day, right? So the idea of, the generations and our children, this is totally what should be on our minds today. And I would argue that part of being a good parent is to fight for a safe climate for your children. So I'd like to introduce Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, currently serving in the great state of Michigan's 12th congressional district, also my home state, which includes the city of Detroit and many surrounding communities. She has been a leading voice in raising awareness for the pressing climate crisis, holding big oil companies accountable, and promoting legislative efforts that prioritize the environment and social justice. Notably, she's played a pivotal role as a co-sponsor of the Climate Equity Act and reintroducing the Fossil-Free Finance Act. This critical piece of legislation aims to compel major banks and financial institutions to cease financing projects that contribute to harmful greenhouse gas emissions. We are honored to have you here with us tonight, Congresswoman. Can you speak on the importance of this crisis and urgent need for action?
Yeah, and thank you so much to all of you for continuing to, speak the truth about what's going on and being courageous. Many of you have been part of civil disobedience actions and pushing back against, I guess the gaslighting that is happening really through various levels of government. And so I know all of you, many of you are the choir. So I just want to get to, I used to be the person on the outside demanding action. I grew up in a district and grown up in a community in Southwest Detroit where I literally thought smelling like hydrogen sulfide on my clothes after playing outside was normal. I thought that many trucks through the neighborhood is normal. I thought literally the smokestacks of the petroleum refinery, near where I grew up and all of the industry around was normal. And so, and I saw the cost of it from, the public health cost of it and not even having universal health care and so much more. And we're still struggling now, even with the fires in Canada. We're seeing in Detroit this direct impact of, again, children not being able to play outside. And again, I'm just here because I don't want us to normalize. And I feel like I'm actually very scared that it's becoming normalized, that we're having fires, that we see these, again, direct impact on public health, like just looking at it as a stat and not realizing how devastating it is and how painful it is to, again, allow the fossil fuel industry to continue to profit off of extraction and off of, burning our earth. So on the inside, it is definitely bipartisan in that regard of who is standing up for fossil fuel. They're not saying it that way. It is very clear to me, and this rhetoric around the climate projects are, for national security is bullshit. They aren't about energy security. We're seeing the demand for fossil fuels declining now and into the future. And so these projects are about making money for a small handful of people at the cost of the entire ecosystem and communities that will be sacrificed for that greed. What you're seeing now is the fossil fuel industry and lobbyists are now going around Congress. They're still focused in Congress, but they're going around Congress and trying to look for executive action. The dark room behind doors in the White House, drafting bills, drafting amendments, telling, hey, we can do this or that. Many of them are even trying to repeal some of the small, minute movement, which probably, is just not enough for communities like mine in the Inflation Reduction Act. And again, we have to move with the urgency. You all get it, but I just want you all to know they're going to the judiciary branch or they're going to the executive branch and going around Congress. They're going at all levels of trying to, again, push back on any sort of, halt in the trillions of dollars and these billions every year towards subsidies for the fossil fuel industry and so much more. I know this, and it needs to be very clear. And I tell my residents all the time, we still have time for President Biden to reverse course. He can revoke and deny presidential permits. He can announce a ban on new fossil fuel leasing. He can say, this is it. We're going to do fossil fuel phase outs right now, starting today. And he can declare the climate emergency that we believe is very much, again, it's this. I mean, it's like, I think Adam says, you say, duh. It is very much something that I think the American people are with us on. But I think Grace Lee Boggs taught me in Detroit, and Grace Lee would sit in an audience of young people like myself and say, we did not get the Civil Rights Act or organizing unions in the workplace because of who was in Congress or who was in the White House. It was because the streets demanded it. And so I'm asking all of you to know, one, I know many of you are focused on members of Congress. That's good, but let's also focus on reforms to the Supreme Court and judicial process, and let's focus on the White House and the Biden administration on these issues. I know we need leadership from the administration and Congress. I'm tired of the fossil fuel talking points and these trinkets of, well, we got this, we got that. Go back to your districts and talk about these things. That is not changing the quality of life of my residents. And so I'm not going to go back and gaslight them or say this is, this is what's going to actually, save our, be able to get us clean water, be able to get us clean air. And so I just want you all to know it is hard for me as a Democrat to see some of the things that the previously impeached president was pushing for now become a reality. We were able to stop these pipelines before, and I was very much, happy to see, at least some commitment before in regards to this. And now we're seeing conversations around debt ceiling that has fucking nothing to do with the deficit or the debt ceiling conversation to be able to eject this fast tracking of fossil fuel projects that could not get through the House and the Senate. And they decided to go again directly to the executive branch and get that green light. And so again, we have to be much more aggressive in regards to fossil fuel expansions. It's already outpaced what the Trump administration was trying to do. You all know already, I know this is just, again, me speaking on behalf of my district. We are tired of being studied. We are tired of the task forces. We are tired of commissions. We're done. We're at this point where we're like, we get it. We know this is happening. But my residents are so they're underestimated because they'll tell you, we can create jobs with this. So I don't get it, Rashida. Why aren't we moving? We can do amazing things and trying to, again, save our earth, our world in this regard. But again, for them, they feel just because they don't have those dollars that they are not going to get a voice through the White House and through the Senate and the House. But I can tell you this. What I saw was a miracle to even just have people starting to talk about climate when they're running for office or they're at various town halls. Not once do I go into any spaces that I'm not asked about the climate crisis. That this is just me being totally frank and honest. Maybe it's not you all, but I saw this when President, I think it froze. Sorry. When President Obama was elected, people kind of fell asleep. They're like, they got it. When Trump was in office, I mean, it was such a huge bullhorn that was consistent. And I felt it and it energized me. And I was like, yes, keep going, keep going. Like, I ain't making this up. This is happening in not only Appalachia, like it's happening all over our country. It's happening in communities that not only look like mine, but look like, again, folks that always think it's only brown and Black communities. Yes, we are definitely on the front line and always the number one target, but it is all over our country. I don't see that level of pushback that I did in the previous administration. And I really think that has hurt us a lot. And so I know, folks always are surprised when me saying that, but I'm just being frank and honest with people and saying that, of course, we didn't, I think we didn't expect it to be at this point where we see the person we thought was going to be the guard in the pushback on pipelines and now green lighting it to the point where I think it is going to be incredibly devastating, but we can still reverse course. We still can declare a climate emergency. We still have, I think, the organizing machines and the infrastructure out there to continue to do this. But again, I need us all to be loud and very clear and not fighting among us. And environmental groups know this. There are more and more people that very much do not look at so-called endorsements or any of this. They look at the actual outcome and what we're seeing with the fires, what we're seeing in communities like mine, where it just came out that we have one of the worst air qualities in the nation here in Detroit, where we already seen lead poisoning among our children, infant mortality at high rate. I mean, you name it, we have the studies, we have the facts. It's just not moving fast enough. And, it's time to shame people. This is in the backyard of so many people, Margaret. Districts that, again, I just don't think that they're hearing enough from folks. I feel like I'm easy target, so people call me and I'm like, I'm on it, I'm good. Don't waste your energy and time on me, go to the next person. But yeah, just continue to speak truth to power, y'all. If we don't get the policies we need, if our legislative process is failing us, the direct action gets the goods. I've seen it over and over again here in my backyard in Detroit, where we birthed movements over and over again. When they told us shutting off water of thousands of people in our community, we brought the United Nations in. We kept pushing when the city administration wouldn't recognize it. And we kept doing it until people understood that this was a huge crisis in our community, and it was impacting not only Detroit, but around the country. And so, we're not going anywhere, y'all. Again, we have such an incredible movement that I think is growing more and more. I think now, though, we got to use the bullhorn in a way that we did when the previous administration was in the White House. Thank you all so much. And again, I appreciate you all. I didn't vote for that ceiling thing, but what I want you to know, it helped to get those emails from my constituents that said, don't do it because we can't have another pipeline. We can't continue to do this. And so I just really appreciate all of you. And again, know you have a partner and a fighter in the United States Congress, and I'm never going to sell out and I'm never going to waver, no matter what name calling they send my way. Thank you so much.
Hell yes. I'm so excited to introduce the group Climate Defiance next. And it's a great segue because Congresswoman Tlaib recently joined a Climate Defiance protest, really walking the walk. So thank you so much, Congresswoman, for being here and for understanding and speaking about the true scale and urgency of this catastrophe. Climate Defiance is a brand new youth-led group using disruptive action to resist fossil fuels. They blocked the main entrances to the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and just this month shut down a keynote address by Joe Manchin. E&E News wrote, with its public displays of opposition, the activist group Climate Defiance is elevating environmental concerns with Biden to the political spotlight, arguably unlike any other group in the ideologically varied tableau of US environmental groups. As the Congresswoman said, direct action gets the goods. We have to be loud. This is the way. I love how they just yell at politicians, get from their book launches and their keynote addresses, and it's really very exciting stuff. So drop the link in the chat, and we encourage you to sign up and get involved with Climate Defiance and support their efforts. So specifically now we're going to hear from Riley Haut, a 24-year-old native West Virginian who's been arrested 4 times and hunger striked for 23 days for the Freedom to Vote Act. She got involved in climate justice direct action last year, participating in the coal baron blockade at the Grant Town power plant in West Virginia, where Senator Manchin makes over $500,000 a year from the coal company. I just want to note that Climate Emergency Fund was the proud supporter of that coal baron blockade. Riley is a recruitment lead with Climate Defiance and has participated in over 10 direct actions with them since March.
Hi, thank you guys so much. Thank you so much, Congresswoman. I don't know how I'm supposed to follow that up, but as Margaret mentioned, my name is Riley Haut. I'm 24 years old, and I'm originally from Parkersburg, West Virginia. This is the place where DuPont has been dumping forever chemicals into our water since before I was born. So it's always kind of been known that these extractive industries have been polluting us and lying to us for well over a century in Appalachia. And I know I'm tired of it, and I'm only 24. So yeah, I started organizing in 2021 with Unpack for the Freedom to Vote Act. This would have exposed dark money in politics, would have made Election Day a federal holiday, would have ended partisan gerrymandering. It would have been huge to see action on climate justice. And Senator Manchin, my senator from West Virginia, was a co-sponsor of the Freedom to Vote Act. So we ran the largest canvassing operation in West Virginia history. We knocked over 70,000 doors statewide. We helped pass resolutions through student governments at WVU and Marshall. We hosted rallies. We met with over 12 senators. We did everything that we're supposed to do. And even after all of that, it seemed like they were just going to sweep it under the rug and brush off our voting rights. And so we decided to hunger strike for 23 days against the advice of coalition members and funders. Everybody was screaming, "Don't do it, don't do it." And we saw that direct action does get the goods. We were told by a trusted source that the reason the Freedom to Vote Act came back up on the Senate floor in January of 2022 was because of our hunger strike, because of 40 young people sitting outside the White House doing direct action. So it's completely possible if we mobilize all together. And so, as mentioned, I started organizing for climate justice at the coal baron blockade in West Virginia at the coal plant, one of the dirtiest in the nation that's still burning coal waste, the dirtiest kind of coal you can burn, where Manchin makes $500,000 a year there from the trucking company that ships coal waste to that plant. And so being able to directly confront him the last 2 weeks was a very full circle moment for me, because Manchin isn't just an outlier. Like, this is a constant pattern of the fossil fuel industry. They continue to lie about the harmful effects their projects will have. They continue to cut corners and harm workers in the process. And I constantly remind myself why I'm doing this by thinking back to the union coal miners who stood up for our labor rights and for our healthcare. When they were stuck in coal towns being paid by company money that they could only use at the company store, and they could only pay their rent to the company. It was all the coal company. And I feel like this is just such a mirror of our current reality. And it's so infuriating because I know the legacy. I know how many lies they've spread to Appalachians, and I'm not here to be lied to. So I began organizing with Climate Defiance in February because I really don't see a pathway to sufficient climate action unless we're able to see mass amounts of people taking disruptive direct action to resist fossil fuel extraction. And so I'm super excited to be with Climate Defiance. I mean, we've done over around 20 actions since we launched in March. That included blockading the White House Correspondents' Center. We disrupted keynote speeches of White House climate advisors John Podesta and Ali Zaidi. We disrupted Amy Klobuchar's book tour, who then ended up voting to strip the MVP from the debt ceiling. I'm not giving us all the credit, but I'm saying direct action gets the goods. And more recently, Senator Manchin, where I tried to speak with him. I told him, hey, I'm a constituent. I tried all the ways to meet with you, and now I'm left to do this. So why aren't you speaking with West Virginians? We don't want a 300-mile long pipeline to go through the same mountains that have already been blown up by mountaintop removal. Not to mention that the Mountain Valley Pipeline, 75% of the trail is literally going to be in an area that is highly prone to landslides. This project, they knew it wouldn't stand up to judicial review. They knew it wouldn't stand up to environmental review. And that's why they had to push it through the debt ceiling in a completely undemocratic decision. So yeah, all that being said, I'm infuriated. I'm here in a bathroom in Michigan because I'm doing another direct action to disrupt Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm tomorrow. We do not stop, y'all. So if you're looking to be moving and doing direct action after direct action, we are the group for you. And I really, really hope that you'll support us because we are a small, scrappy group of Gen Z organizers, and we need all the support that we can get. We need all the people that we can get. It is all hands on. We are running out of time. But the legacy of West Virginians, specifically union miners fighting for our labor rights, will always remind me that change is not impossible. And so folks like President Biden and Senator Manchin need to understand that young people aren't just going to sit idly by while they burn our futures and then lie about it to our faces. The fact that he's greenlighting new fossil fuel projects at a faster rate than Trump, when he does have the power to declare a climate emergency and he does have the power to end new fossil fuel leases, should infuriate every single one of you and should lead you to take action. And so I hope that you will, and I hope that you'll join us by going to climatedefiance.org. And if Congresswoman Tlaib wants to join us tomorrow in Detroit, I'm just putting it out there that you are more than welcome to join us. So yeah, please sign up at climatedefiance.org. And thank you all so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Riley. It's a really very funny and exciting thing about working with activists that they're always calling in from a bathroom in Michigan or, you know, a hostel because they've got to appear in court the next day in Berlin or whatever. It's so you get to go along with them a little bit for the ride. But yeah, thank you. One thing that's so exciting about Climate Defiance is their pace of actions. They just keep going at it. Really exciting. And now we get to hear from another very exciting group, which is Declare Emergency. With love, they act to make it impossible for business as usual to continue until Joe Biden declares a climate emergency. In its first year and a half, Declare Emergency has blocked traffic on numerous roadways in and around Washington, D.C., including 2 blockades of the Beltway. Supporters have acted nonviolently to disrupt normal life in settings such as the Kennedy Center and at the Degas display in the National Gallery of Art. Millions of people have seen this news and interacted with social media posts covering these actions. All supporters who participate in Declare Emergency actions must go through in-depth, nonviolent civil resistance training, and all who make the sacrifice of allowing themselves to be arrested receive significant jail, court, and prison support. Now, this is to say, we are hoping that you all will get this training and take part in this level of civil resistance. So on Sunday, June 25th at 5 p.m., please join the Introduction to Declare Emergency talk. Registration will be in the chat. And then also, of course, you can support them with a donation also through the chat. So our next speaker is Donald Zepeda from Declare Emergency. He has spent over 4 months in jail and been arrested 16 times so far for nonviolent climate civil disobedience. Thank you for your sacrifices, Donald. That's incredibly brave, and take it away.
All right. Thanks, Margaret. So being willing to take a fall moves people. People don't want to see people getting hurt or suffering. I might not like how they did it, some people might say. I might not like them personally, but I respect it. They stuck it through, and they're not running from it. Sacrifice makes it more likely that our actions get attention, more likely that they get covered. It makes us more sympathetic as actors. So sacrifice is really, really important. Nonviolent disruption of the public is also important. Mass disruption is a way to get the public involved and engaged, and it's something we try to do with Declare Emergency. If we don't have this component as part of our climate action ecosystem, we don't do things where people can see us and inconvenience them or shock mass numbers of regular folks like you or me in some way. It could just be seen as a conversation only between activists and elites. And if most of the public doesn't see themselves as activists or elites, so it must not have anything to do with them. But it does. We need to get the public to confront this issue. So we aim for whatever causes the most kerfuffle. Everyone has to see it. Everyone has to cover it. Everyone is impacted. Because only when that happens will we move on the scale that we need to save ourselves and the ones we love. Nonviolence makes us sympathetic, even amongst people who dislike us. When people crack down, that, again, makes us more sympathetic. People might be like, well, these guys, they're twats. But if you look at the images, you see people engaging with each other. If you look at the videos we generate, you don't have all this like rationalization of things, at least not immediately. You have an emotional reaction. And sometimes there might be angry people yelling at people who are not angry or dragging them away, who are just being nonviolent. But just seeing that sort of stuff, that moves people. It makes people more likely to be sympathetic, get involved, and it lowers the barrier to entry so that it's not just young men with a chip on their shoulder and something to prove doing all of these things. Nonviolence means more than just not fighting back or being a pushover. You stand resolute in your nonviolence. You know what you're there for. If someone moves you off the road, you let them do it, but get right back into the road as soon as you see the opportunity. When I go into an action, I feel like I've put everything on the line at that point. I know that everything short of this sort of action isn't going to do it. Only when I'm taking part in these types of actions is when and where I feel right. It's the best that I can about my place in the world. My existence is a burden on other people. Our current policies make it so that to even exist in a highly industrialized country like our own is to live unsustainably and to jeopardize the lives of those who don't, or who won't, or who can't. And our fellow unsustainable neighbors and friends are at risk as well. And so doing massively disruptive nonviolent civil disobedience, it's necessary. It's a necessary and important part of getting us to where we need to be. We need a lot more people than we currently have working on this sort of thing specifically, engaging in this type of action, if we want to see the kind of changes that we need to see.
Joe Biden's one step forward, two steps back approach to the climate crisis sends us hurtling towards climate catastrophe, barely able to register the tipping points as they rush by. Declare Emergency speaks with our action.
Right before the action, I started to get nervous, but like excited. But surprisingly, when we were about to walk on the road and we did walk in the road and sat down and people were very upset, I was actually at peace. I was kind of like, this is where I need to be.
With strict nonviolence, Declare Emergency supporters put our bodies on the line to demand that Joe Biden declare climate emergency, which at this point is pretty much the same as declaring that water is wet, and that he use his emergency powers to do everything possible to bring an immediate halt to the Carbon Death Project.
So it's my birthday this week. I'm turning 32. and I shouldn't have to be here. I should be out celebrating. But as a young person today, how can I celebrate a future that looks so bleak?
Just us going and sitting out in some roads and, talking to some upset individuals and redirecting some of those emotions towards our shared responsibility and obligation to protect the earth.
The idea is that we wake people up with a shock, and we do it in a way that engages and invites their emotional centers. We want to activate people's emotions so that they can stop ignoring and turn and looking the other way, because we cannot afford to look the other way anymore.
In Declare Emergency, the generations come together to speak with one voice. We call for Joe Biden to declare a climate emergency, yes, and we call for much more than that as well. We call on one another across all of the lines and categories that could divide us, inviting everyone into a space where we can speak and listen to each other with kindness. Always aware that when it comes to the ability of humanity to survive on Earth, we're all in the same boat. Come find us at declareemergency.org. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Donald. I really resonate with the idea of shocking people and waking them up. The idea that we're in a mass delusion of normalcy and intervening in normalcy as critical to the solution, I strongly agree with, so thank you. And thank you to all of our speakers. At this point, we're going to move to the most important part of the call, which is the breakout rooms. This is your chance to actually reflect on and share how you can get involved, your reaction to these speakers and how you can get involved. So how they're going to work, most of the rooms will be facilitated. If there's not a facilitator in your room, you're going to self-facilitate, which I trust everyone here is capable of. It's very simple. You're going to go around in 2 rounds of everybody getting a chance to share. Each person gets a maximum of 2 minutes for their share. You can do less if you prefer. The first question that you answer as you go around is, how do you feel about what has been said tonight? And what do you feel about your own responsibilities? Okay, so this is a chance to reflect on the emotions that you have about the climate emergency and how you're feeling as someone who's living at this time of just incredible consequence. So what are your responsibilities? And then in the second go round, it's time to think about what you want to do to make some kind of commitment. What we're suggesting are to donate to Climate Defiance or Climate Emergency, Declare Emergency, to attend the follow-up to tonight's event, Introduction to Declare Emergency. This is it, Sunday, June 25th, 5 p.m. Eastern. So that's 1 week from today. And then to sign up to take action with one of these exciting, disruptive, brave groups. After the breakout room, we're going to say goodbye. The breakout room is going to be the last activity of this call. So before we go there, I just want to say thank you so much to everyone for coming out on a Sunday, on Father's Day, to, another Zoom call, right? But this is what we need to be doing. It's this time in history is disruption time, because we're on a sinking ship, and it's time to stand up. So yeah, just thanks to everyone for coming out and giving civil disobedience its due consideration. Yeah, let's go to the breakout rooms.
Margaret, real
Yes.
quick. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to throw $100,000 to Climate Emergency Fund. A lot of people know my wife and I, Shira Pivot, have already made large commitments to Climate Emergency Fund, but that 100,000 will be coming in the next 2 weeks, specifically for climate defiance and declare emergency here in the States.
Amazing. Adam, as always, an inspiration. Please, so as you think about how much you can give to these brave groups, you know, keep that in mind. So yeah, thanks everyone.